Well, we can get started today then. I know this is the first of our Spring Connects, so please look at our schedule and attend as many as you would like. So I'll get started today and introduce our speaker. So today we have Bryan Whittington. He is a leader in sales, marketing, and business execution who works with the fast growth companies in technologies, manufacturing, and professional services. He has both built and helped his clients to build companies from startup to publicly traded companies like Wabtec and Thermo Fisher Scientific, sorry, to name a few. He has more than 3 decades in sales, customer service, a decade and a half in entrepreneur, and more than a decade working with clients to help them rapidly grow their businesses. He is certified as a Sandler sales trainer, HubSpot partner, and is an EOS implementer. Bryan, a retired captain and decorated U.S. Air Force pilot, flying missions in both Iraq and Enduring Freedom, graduated cum laude from Robert Morris University, resides with his wife, 6 children, and dog Jasper in Pittsburgh, PA. In his spare time, you can find Bryan coaching his daughter's basketball team, reading business books, and investing in real estate. So, Bryan, I'll let you get started.
Jeez, sounds better than what I actually did, and especially, cum laude at Robert Morris is nothing compared to CMU. So, appreciate you all having me here very much. And what I'd ask you to do is absolutely stop me, interrupt me, ask me questions as we're going along here. We likely won't be able to get through all of the slides. However, if that's indeed the case, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'll go ahead and make sure that my contact information is in here. But the reason that I started this organization, EBS Growth, is because I've seen so many founders and business owners where they have these great ideas, but getting to the sales side, getting to the sales execution side is a real challenge, right? Because the thing is, even bad salespeople tend to interview well. We think that we have the Hulk that we hire on Friday to do our sales operations, our sales execution, and then Pee Wee Herman shows up on Monday, and you're like, what in the world happened? And we waste time and resources, and we don't get our dreams. So my hope is from today that we take a lot of this information, but information or knowledge is pointless. Let's really look to take 1, maybe 2 things that we can take and apply to this and make application today. So let's ask me and make sure that you really understand at a depth level how to execute on this so we can walk away out of this with a couple of key elements. So with that said, let's jump into this. It's really easy. Right? For all of us as entrepreneurs, it's really easy to have a goal. We all have this dream of being the next unicorn. But the challenge is, all of us want to be this unicorn, and I don't know about you, but maybe you can overly complicate and overly engineer things, and then your business plan, your execution plan looks like this. Or maybe you're a little schizophrenic like I am, and you're either over planning, over complicating, or you're a shoot, ready, aim kind of person, and you just jump into it. Or maybe you're like so many other entrepreneurs, especially if we have a very technical or complex solution. Maybe you're that perfectionist, and we get this paralysis by analysis, but whatever the case may be, hopefully, we eventually look to take action. So that's why I'm really proud of Andrew and McFadden, I forget, Mara McFadden, for jumping in and taking action, right? Those actions is where we get things to learn. So we go to market, we're making things happen, we're talking to people, we're looking at product market fit, we're having our sales team, or maybe we as the founder, we're getting out there and talking to people, but then we run into it. Let me pause here so I'll allow you to read this. And it's the age-old dilemma, right? We get this feedback, and marketing and sales, they're going at one another. I need more leads. You don't follow up with the leads, and it's back and forth and back and forth. And in reality, really what we need is marketing. As sales and marketing, those functions are really difficult to differentiate. Specifically on that top of the funnel, when should marketing take over? When should sales take over? am I doing outbound demand generation or am I doing inbound lead conversion? And so much of that is, yes, it's marketing, but yes, it's also sales. And whenever we put sales enablement tools or marketing automation tools in there, it really gets to be confusing. And I really believe that it's a time for a change. Right? So how can we get these to combine? How can we get our sales, our marketing, and with all that are or people facing, client facing, how can we get them to engage and be on the same story? So you're likely doing this now. We already know about the scientific method, or maybe we use design thinking, and I really encourage us to do that. I mean, however we call it, right? Is we have an idea, make a couple of guesses, we implement, and we get feedback as quickly as possible to make the changes. And I don't know why, but somebody marked down this desired outcome as a desired outcome, thinking with that desired outcome as a transformative concept. I don't know. I always looked at it that way, and it's not new. You look at Stephen Covey, he's been suggesting that for years. Or you look at Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, that visualizing what you want. So however you want to talk about it, the idea is how do we get this idea and concept to become this year over year accelerated revenue growth, this hyper growth of 40%. In order for us to do this, we want to use the same engineering prowess or the same prowess that you've done to get to where you are with a couple of key numbers. Now, here are some key numbers. So this is where you might want to start to take some notes here. And you likely already know this. So for those of you that already get this, I apologize, but it's so critical. When I'm talking with organizations, there's so few that know the lifetime value of the customer, or there's so few that know their average customer value. They say things like, and hopefully this isn't you, but you've likely heard it. They say things like, well, it depends, right? Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's little. So it's really hard to tell what our average sale is, or what our average contract value is. Or it's really hard to tell how long it takes to go through our sales cycle, or how long we should keep a person or keep a client. So all of those things we really want to get after and know that information. So the lifetime value of the customer, or the average contract value, or the average value of a sale. How often are you going to be able to do that? Is it a monthly recurring revenue? Is it a service? Is it a product offering? What's that look like? And then how long are we going to retain that client, and what are the margins? So these numbers are critical to know. So we can start to do, and I'll get to it in a little bit, a math of sales. So I've been bantering on for quite a while here. So why don't I get some feedback from the group? Questions, thoughts, feedback, because I went through that pretty darn quickly, and we'll end up going to this next piece, which is a customer acquisition formula. So thoughts, questions, feedback so far. It's usually one or two at this point.
Bryan, I think what you were saying about sales and marketing kind of going at each other is especially kind of funny in my case, in which we have a team that does both sales and marketing at the same time. And even when you have a small team, that battle is ongoing just internally. Where do you place your time and your efficiency? Do you have any advice for smaller companies who are kind of doing it all at once? How to kind of place their decision making?
100%. And I would say that not only for smaller companies that are doing this all at once, but also for the founders. We as founders, we're having to do design, create the business. We're doing our bookkeeping at night. All of these different parts and pieces, we're having to prioritize everything. So to answer your question, Andrew, we're going to get to talking about an idea that's segmenting the business up, or segmenting the leads up into different components or different buckets. So if you don't mind, I'm definitely going to answer that and hold me to it. Whenever we talk about buckets, do me a favor. If I don't answer your question there, let's bring that back up. But aside from the bucket side of it, or thought of it, the other piece is put proactive prospecting time in there. Think of it this way. If I need to have one meeting a week, one net new customer meeting a week, or 2, or 5, or 10, or whatever your number is, the encouragement to you is to put that time in your calendar that you would need for that client meeting and that prospect meeting. If you don't have that prospect meeting filled with an actual prospect, that's forced prospecting time. So as busy as we get, if we prioritize what's important versus urgent, and we're disciplined in that prioritization of time blocking, that's a key way of doing that. And less is more in this case too, Andrew. Consistency is key. If we go sprints and have fits of greatness, but I'd rather, instead of you having fits of greatness, rather have you be consistent in your execution a little bit over time. Has a much bigger effect than a whole bunch of sprinting with a whole bunch of resting, then a whole bunch of sprinting again. That back and forth is really what keeps that oscillation flat, as opposed to oscillation as it's going vertically. So does that help to answer the question in a clear enough manner?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Okay, perfect. And again, everyone, feel free to jump in and ask me additional questions. So whenever we're talking about the customer acquisition formula, this is one piece.
I have a question about lifetime value.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm currently a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon. Prior to that, I worked in a real estate company. It was actually a brokerage company, and we developed our own app to basically try to bring in more customers and convert to more showings and like making more sales of our real estate. So I wonder, for an app like that, how do you calculate the lifetime value? Because we don't actually make money from like the app. It was just a marketing tool for us. But is there a way to like apply this model and like calculate the value of that app?
So with a lifetime value of real estate, so real estate transaction is going to be a little bit unique. You're usually about 3 to 5 years, if not a little bit longer. Now it's going to depend on your region, but at least in Pittsburgh, you're about a 3 to 5 year length of stay in your house. A typical lifetime value of a product is going to be couched in that 3 to 5 years. So if you look at it, let me see if I can highlight it. If you look at this graph here, go to laser pointer, it's number of transactions. So your number of transactions would only be 1 or maybe 2 on a residential customer. But if you look at investors, that might be the product market fit for an investors, where we might have more touches there. Now, who was the end user, or who were you selling this app to? Was it brokers? Was it end users, or who was using it?
Developed app, like our company developed it ourselves. So
okay.
We're trying to calculate the value, like the cost and the value, and to decide whether to input more resource into this project.
Okay, so whether to put more resources into the project, I think I might be answering the wrong question. Let me go to this slide and see if it helps. If we look at customer acquisition cost, what I would think there, it's Lucina, right?
Yeah,
Luciana. Okay. So what I would look to there is, what is our total sales, spend, and marketing cost? And this is where I'd really encourage you to push back, and I mean push back hard, on those that are doing the finance for your organizations, because they're still doing revenue minus cost of goods sold as what the value is going to be, or what your gross margins are going to be. But that's not necessarily the case, especially whenever we're bringing more and more technology into this space, because there's a report out, and I can't give it credit, so forgive me here, but the report is that cost of goods sold is reducing, but the general sales and administrative expenses are on the increase, and that's because of these the sales engagement and marketing engagement tools, I think, are getting thrown in there. So we're not taking that into account. So whenever we're looking at our sales and marketing expenses, we have to look at the cost of the salary, cost of the bonus, cost of the platforms that we're on. I mean, it's not unusual to have about $1,500 to $2,000 per salesperson on some of these sales enablement tools. I mean, they get really expensive whenever you start adding Salesforce up, the work that we have to do to get Salesforce working. If you have an auto dialer, if you have a sales email engagement, the training that goes along with that, there's a ton of cost in that sales and marketing. And then if you divide that by the number of customers, your net new customers, that gives you your customer acquisition cost. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to one slide here, which will hopefully give some more insight. So whenever we look at this, there is if we look at the, where was I going here? If we look at it like this, how many attempts do we need? How many, what's the percentage of attempts outbound to connections to your booked meetings? And then we look at the cost associated with it. So right here, pull this highlight up. If we look at this, if you can see this well enough, that's what we really have to determine is the outreach, the customer acquisition cost worth what we're going to get over here from a lifetime value of a customer and the profit margin. So for example, I was working with one technology company that's fairly commoditized, and their lifetime value of a customer was, believe it or not, about $150,000 to $200,000 over a 5-year period. That was their lifetime value that they chose to do. But their monthly reoccurring revenue was only about $1,500 to $3,000. But because there were so many cross-sell, upsell, expansion opportunities, they were able to justify that customer acquisition cost. So they were willing to spend $20,000 to make $150,000. So all of those calculations have to come into mind to determine if I want to do the type of sales approach. So think of it this way. Whenever I look at my sales approach, my go-to-market approach, a lot of the things that are going to have to come to mind is, what's my sales cycle look like? Is it a long sales cycle or a short sales cycle? Is it relationship based, or is it more I need to close the business and how to differentiate myself? And then I can't remember, Andrew, if you said, how do we divvy this up? Another way that you might want to divvy this up is, who is the best person for that job? So if you look at over here, the type of sales, all salespeople aren't created equal, just like all engineers. I might be a really good civil engineer, but a really lousy software engineer, and vice versa. So not all are the same. So you have to determine, what approach am I going to take? What sales methodology am I going to take? And that has to take into account my customer acquisition cost and then my total addressable market. Because if I have a smaller total addressable market, and here's a scary thought, everyone's competing for that same 3% that's ready to buy right now. Those are also the most challenging, because although it might be a shorter sales cycle, they're beating us up on price or beating us up on margin. And so they're going to oftentimes be the least profitable, but the shortest sales cycle. The ideal is if you can get in around here, those that are maybe a quarter or two out, or 30% today woke up and didn't even consider buying what you offer because they didn't realize they have a problem. So if we can get our messaging down and engage them early enough in the process where they woke up today thinking they were perfectly fine, but from our messaging, from what we do and how we say it, we're able to get them to think, oh my gosh, I don't feel well. Holy cow, I didn't realize how much frustration or how frustrated I was. There's a solution for this? Yes, let's talk. And so if you can get these one-ons on a consistent enough basis, that's whenever we start to see margins show up. That's whenever we start to expand our total addressable market or immediate market to go after. Instead of that 3%, now we're up to 40%, which is a fairly large increase. And then if we can put some systems and processes to it, and we'll get that in a second, how do we then go from not just this 40%, but how do we add in that extra 60%? Because here's what we know. Every single quarter, life changes drastically. And what worked this quarter might not work next quarter. And so those 30% that have no interest this quarter, if I have the ability to hit almost my whole entire addressable market by bringing value, then why wouldn't I touch them on an ongoing basis? See if I can get them closer to that 7% a little bit more quickly than otherwise they would. Or maybe people that just bought, if I have the bandwidth through marketing automation and these sales enablement tools, maybe I can hit people that had purchased, we lost to, but that onboarding process, because so many companies mess that up, that's a really delicate time. Just like if you're taking off in an airplane, the most dangerous time is on takeoff and landing because you're low and slow. just like customer onboarding or that initial stages of the handoff from sales to delivery, that's whenever it's the most dangerous. So sometimes we can step in. If they've dropped the ball, if your competitor dropped the ball, then we can pick them up there. So let me just stop there and get some feedback before we transition to the 4 key most important variables and how we address this total addressable market and all of the total cost of the customer value and sales value, how we set the team up. So let me just, any questions or feedback there?
No, thank you for answering my question. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I just had a question. Is this sort of different for, like, if what you're selling is a service and not a product, like it's your time consulting versus, you know, having something that costs some amount to make versus you sell for a certain other amount? Like, I'm assuming that's different, but I'm just...
It is a little bit different. The good news is the process and the methodology will still align. However, what you have to ask yourself is, am I going to only be able to trade dollars for hours, or is there a way of scaling this up? So if you can create a program or a methodology that others will buy into, or you can train junior folks to be able to do, the real question there is, how can I duplicate myself so it's not just me? The principles will stay the same. The execution will be a little bit different. So can you give me maybe a little bit more insight? Is it just you, or do you have a team under you that you can train? Is there a methodology that you're leveraging?
No, it's just me. So I would have to be sales and doing the work and all of that. So there's no sales team, marketing team. It's kind of me figuring that out. But I think I'm just kind of struggling with figuring that out, because I know obviously there are people who do that professionally as a whole job, which I have little to no experience in selling things.
Well, welcome to the club. There's a lot there. So this next part is going to, I think, help you out with that, Julianne. So think of it this way. The 4 M's of sales revenue is the total addressable market. So how big is your market? Is it regional? Is it the whole entire country? Is it nationally? How big is your total addressable market? Then once I determine that total addressable market, now let me dig down a little bit more deeply there. Whenever I look at total addressable market, I want to know the industries they serve, or the type of industry to go after. How big of that is the company that I'm going after within that industry? Is it product specific, or in some of our cases, service specific for that size? Because some enterprise organizations might buy one piece of my service, but not the whole service, where the SMB space might buy the whole service, but not be able to afford to chunk it out. They need an overarching. So there's a lot that goes into it. So know your ideal customer profiles. And not only that, but then also the personas. Who are they? What are they concerned about within that sales revenue, or excuse me, within that total addressable market? And from that, we want to create the list. Now, here's what most people miss, and I'm guilty of this. I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but this is so true. I thought a list was a list as a list. I grew up in the old days where you actually had to, dial a phone rotary and all that stuff. And I thought you just had names and you called the names, but that's not the case anymore. With everybody wanting customization whenever you reach out to them, or a high level of relevance. If you can't customize, because you can't customize everything, they want that high level of relevance. How do I do that at scale? And so that list is really your strategy. So I would really encourage you, if you're going to invest initially in one key area of the business, I would really encourage you to get to know who your ideal customer profile is, the personas within it, and really what they're hoping that you can solve for them. And this is a big takeaway that I learned recently. There's a great book out there, not sure if you've read it or not, called Obviously Awesome. I can't remember the author's name, but Obviously Awesome. She's from Canada. I would really encourage you to pick up that book. And that goes through a really nice sequence of how to get that right positioning and messaging down. So that's the total addressable market. And then we move to the message. How do we identify that message to the market? And what are the different mediums through which we can deliver that message to the market? And lastly, and this goes to your point, what's the messenger? Who's the messenger? Can I do that through LinkedIn and a LinkedIn automation, which might be really good for you, Julianne, because consultants typically do well in LinkedIn. Other people do horribly in LinkedIn because the audience isn't there. What I found out recently, we'll touch it on in a second, is that if you're not sales marketing or doing a sales and marketing function, sometimes you're not in LinkedIn very often. So we have to take all of that into account in deciding what the best approach is. So those 4 M's combined with sales cycle and the type of salesperson that we want, which is also then combined with our average customer or our average contract value or a lifetime value, because that's going to determine how I structure and split up the sales team. So that was an awful lot right there. Any questions on that segment of it? I will take that as a no, but feel free to interrupt me as we move on. So when we think of the channel through which we're going to send that message, here's a couple of things to consider. Back in 2015, HubSpot said that 2% of all MQLs close, so marketing qualified leads. Now, let's define marketing qualified lead here. Marketing qualified lead would really be an ideal company of the ideal size with the ideal customer profile that has raised their hand and said, I'm interested. So in my mind, that's what I'm using as an MQL. Only 2% of those closed according to HubSpot, and that was back in 2015. Now this guy here, not sure if you know this person, his name is Chris Walker of Refined Labs. He has great podcasts, great posts on LinkedIn, so if you don't know him, I'd really encourage you to check him out. But what he said is recently only 1% of marketing qualified leads are going to close. Now this guy right here, he was my last guest on my podcast, the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show, Ryan Reichert. He shared with me a stat, and he wasn't able to attribute it, but he shared with me a stat that non-sales and marketing functions only spend 15 minutes or less on LinkedIn. And so much of, if you look at Outreach or if you look at SalesLoft or some of these sales enablement tools or marketing enablement tools, they're telling you spend all of this time on LinkedIn, do all of these different things on social. In reality, people aren't spending a lot of time there. So we really have to know where our audience is so we can get them where they're at. And to make matters worse, if we look at, and these are HubSpot statistics here, if we look at HubSpot and the number of outbound emails really skyrocketed there for a while. It's come down in November, December, and I'm guessing more for the holidays. But if you notice, the open rates or the reply rates have plummeted. And you can actually look this up. If you Google HubSpot Corona statistics, it's a really good resource. I can put it in the notes or share it with you if you'd like it. But it's a really good resource to let you know how much are they calling, how much are they emailing, who's responding, what's the pipeline. And pipeline is really going down right now as well. So all that to say is we have to do a lot more work to get the same results. So let me repeat that because this is critical. If you don't have some ways to do more work with the same amount of effort or less effort, and you can't increase the quantity or the quality, your sales are going to stay stagnant at best or go down. So these are critical key things that we need to learn. So questions, feedback, anything that you need off of those stats. Quiet group here. All right, I'll keep going. So hopefully this is resonating and you're tracking with this. So going to this from a a process standpoint, from a sales development point of view. Let's look at this visually. If I start at the top, and this is going to be 100% of my market up top, and then all of those create my contact list. And these unqualified leads can come from marketing, or they can come from a list. Either way, those are our unqualified leads. And we need to get in here and we need to have a conversation. The key, no matter if we do it through email, whether we do it through telephone, whether we do it through social, however we do it, the key is this. Can I get into a sales conversation, a meaningful dialogue where I can say, here's the problem, here's what others are doing, here's why that's broken, here's what we've discovered, are you interested in learning more? If we can convey that in a conversation, and then we're going to get to that right here, that marketing qualified lead. So right now, depending on the title you're going after, so if you're going after CEOs, you're about 1%. CIOs, 1% of outreach to people having conversations, right? Having conversations is right here. And then if it's lower level in the title or business function, management level is the word I was looking for. It's a little bit lower level in the management. Then you might be up to a 4% or 4 to 5% off of a cold list. And then of those, depending on your messaging, you're going to get about 7 to 10% that book to a meeting. And then of those that book to a meeting, you're going to get about 75 to 80% that are going to keep that meeting. And then of those, you're going to have about 60 to 70% that go into pipeline management. And of those, depending on complexity, you're going to have about a 9 to, I'd say, about a 16.5 close one from that sales qualified kept meeting. And that's where we can then do our science of sales or a math of sales. Now, I went over those numbers pretty quickly. I went to public school, wasn't great at math, so it took me a long time to figure that out. Questions on that, I had a lot whenever I was doing this. Questions on that, the math of sales that I just went through. Okay, now we touched on this a little bit earlier. When we look at this math of sales, what you want to do is compare this to your average contract value or your lifetime customer value and look at what you're going to get from a profit margin. Because if these numbers are here, are your benchmarks as you're going through this from initial lead generation all the way through pipeline, closed won, closed lost. And if this is the cost of a true customer acquisition, right? Not using normal accounting models, but really the true customer acquisition cost of all your sales, all of your marketing spend divided by new customers, that's your true cost of customer acquisition. You're going to go out of business because your sales, your cost to generate is less than your cost to on even top line or on that gross margin or that profit margin, let alone once you take everything else out. So we really have to watch that. Now, the beauty thing is if you can warm that list up, you can validate that list. You can home in on your messaging and you put some systems and processes into place. What you'll discover is now I can have a lower average contract value or even a lower lifetime value of the customer, but if I can improve my ratios, now it's going to drastically cut down my customer acquisition costs. So this sales structure, go-to-market strategy would work here, even on a less expensive average customer value or lifetime value than up here, depending on these ratios. And if you take one thing away today, please take that if I don't know my numbers, if I don't know my benchmarks, I'm really in trouble and I really am going to have a hard time to get more funding if I'm looking for funding, or have a really difficult time in getting the revenue, the lifestyle business that I want if I'm not looking for rapid growth. These numbers are still valid. Now, a funny story, well, not funny, but a story. Who here, raise a hands, if you can, just show your raised hand. Who here even knows Ferris Bueller? This is an old reference. Let's see if any hands raise on the chat window. All right, we only have 2. Son of a gun. So your goal here today is to go out. All right, 3. Woo. So your goal here today is go out and rent Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And notice this pool scene. Over here, we have a hot tub that goes into the regular pool. And I'd say that this is absolutely the best visual for what our sales process should be, or what our lead flow process should be. So let me see if I can get this to work here. If you look at, so we have over here, we have the hot tub. It was working. Hold on one second. So we have that hot tub. I'm going to talk as we do this. We have this hot tub here, right? And that water flows and heats in from the main pool, but that main pool water is also going to the hot tub whenever we move into there, and it's also going into the filtration system to keep it clean. So with that in mind, if you look at that pool, there's no movement whatsoever, right? It's very smooth, not a lot of action right there. But if you look at Ferris and his girlfriend in the hot tub, it is absolutely moving rather quite fast. So let's see if I can get my pen. There we go. I got my pen to work again. So if we look at that, and you have the pool over here. So this is the pool. These are your hot leads, the ones that want activity. You have your filter over here. So out of this pool, it's going to go through the filter. The filter is going to go into here and here. And so we're going to keep that water clean. And we're going to have that movement, that motion. So that way, back to your question earlier, Andrew, we can focus on the hotter opportunities and keep pulling from the pool to get into our hot opportunities. And then make sure that we have it filtered throughout so we keep our pipeline management team. So that's, the leads list clean. So here's how it looks from a bucket management or bucket idea. Bucket 1 would be net new data that's coming in. So if I purchase a list, if I go out and get new leads or whatever the case may be, or if I have leads coming in from marketing, however those leads come in, that's going to go into that pool. And then we're going to take from that pool, and then we're going to make contact with them. And so of those that we're reaching out to, we might not talk to them, but we're going to be able to validate that number. So that's going to give us bucket 2, which are validated numbers. And as we're going through that, we're checking to make sure that they actually are one of our ideal clients. Are they the ideal customer profile, the size company, industry, number of employees, using whatever technology? That's in bucket 2 when we're validating that. Then bucket 3, and this is going to be our hot tub. These are the people that pick up, that reply in email, that respond in social. So whichever channel that they reply back, we then communicate with them in bucket 3. And the curious thing is this, and this is a crazy stat. If I call you and I say, hey Amanda, I caught you the other day at a really bad time, you were busy. AKA Amanda, I called her up cold and she says, I don't take cold calls, click, and she hung up on me, right? But I'm not going to tell her that. I'll say, hey Amanda, I called you back on February 2nd and I caught you at a horrible bad time. I'm guessing now is equally bad. I have a 300% better likelihood of having that conversation with Amanda that will go to a booked exploratory or discovery call than I otherwise would have, just by referencing back the time when we spoke. So that's another key takeaway here. If we're having these conversations, even if they're rude to us, we might have caught them in a bad day, maybe they were busy, who knows? But if we reference back that conversation, we have a much better likelihood of having that dialogue, having that conversation. So we go to that bucket 3. And then from there, we have a meeting booked. And then back to your point, Andrew, you might have people that have strategic account management that can cross-sell, upsell, so we land and expand. So if we look at all of these buckets, we keep the pipeline flowing and clean, and anything that's bad, we put into bucket 0. So that's the idea, that even without a robust CRM, even without a robust sales enablement, marketing enablement tools, we can do this on a fairly low budget, high touch, high visibility. And what we'll find is we can really reduce these numbers from total outreach to meetings booked, meetings kept, deals closed. So that is how we would fundamentally, Andrew, structure the methodology of data and lead flow management to be able to execute on that well. So does that help, Andrew, to finally answer that question that you asked a while back?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Really, thank you so much.
Yep, you bet. Okay, so moving on. We talked about this already. We know that the activities, whatever the activities are going to lead to our cost, or cost are going to differ depending on how well we followed that bucket process or how well we delivered it. But nevertheless, no matter how we're doing it, we have to talk to somebody. And let's end on a couple of tactics here for you. It's really hard to get people, whenever they're as busy as they are, to stop, right? Because most people, this is their viewpoint on cold outreach, no matter how, whether it's email or LinkedIn or telephone, they kind of get this idea because we're interrupting their day. Now the question is, what can we do to be welcomed like a stranger? And I would submit to you that we need to move away from this mindset of always be closing. That's old school, right? That's not what we want to do. We really want to deliver value or go away. And us as we're prospecting, us as we're doing different things, kind of this idea of a gumball, right? So if you think about it this way, when you're growing up and you went down to the corner store, and let's pretend that you had an unlimited number of coins to get the gumball color of choice. And let's pretend your favorite gumball was blue. Well, if I put in the coin and turned that thing to get that color gumball, and blue didn't come out, a green one came out, I wouldn't get upset at me. I wouldn't get upset at the list. I go, well, I see it in there, shoot. And I just keep going and going and going. And so equate that to your sales team, or maybe your approach if you're having to be the sales team. Are we having call reluctance? Does that email seem like it's impossible to pick up or hit send because we have so much baggage about the outreach? And my encouragement to you is think of this. SW, 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 next. And the idea here is some will, some won't, so what, next. Keep finding that ideal color gumball until you get it, because it's not a negative shot on you or your company or anything else. They might just be having a bad day. So keeping that positive mindset, and then taking this 4-step approach to engage somebody. Number 1 is really building trust. And whenever we build trust, we can do this in a couple of different ways, and you want to think about human psychology. So human psychology, whether you're using DISC profile or predictive index or some of these other profiles that have came out recently. I can't recall the one that has the numbers on it. There's animals. It's all the same stuff, right? What is their communication style? What is their methodology? If you looked on LinkedIn, there's a really cool resource called Crystal Knows that helps you to discover this. We also want to make sure that we're mirroring and matching who they are, their tone, their pace. Are they talking fast, slow, high, low, right? Are they dominant? Are they using particular buzzwords? We want to sound like them. And if we're in person, we won't even want to mirror their body language. Now, we do this naturally. Look around the next time you're out and about in a crowd. And if you watch people, you'll see them going back and forth in unison whenever they're engaged. We do this naturally. So the idea here of mirroring and matching is to do this intentionally. And it's not to manipulate, but rather to decrease the time it takes to build trust. So if I know how they communicate and I'm mirroring and matching them, which requires extreme presence and understanding, that allows me to keep moving on. So step number one is mirror and matching and a quick connect. So the way I would do that on a telephone call, for example, I would call somebody up and I'll say, let's see here, we'll pick on, I see a Michael Case on here. I would say, hey, Michael, Bryan Whittington. And let's pretend Michael came off mute and said, oh, hey, what's going on, Bryan? I would know that he's a certain style of communicator. Or if he said, yeah, what do you need? I would know he's another one. If he goes, yes, can I help you? I would know he's an S. If he doesn't say anything at all, I say, hey, Michael, Bryan Whittington. And then there's silence. Then I know he's a C, right? So that allows me to know how I can mirror him in a communication style. And then I want to make sure that I do some type of a pattern interrupt. If I do a pattern interrupt, it's going to be something along the lines of, hey, I know I'm an interruption. Let me just bottom line the reason for my call. Because if you're in a store, or if you need something and somebody is talking to somebody else, or somebody is in the middle of doing something, wouldn't we as humans go up and say, excuse me, I know you're busy, or it looks like you're busy. We would have that type of human-to-human conversation. Let's not bowl them over. So using some type of a pattern interrupt, and there's all kinds of them out there, whether it's, hey, I know an interruption. Can I bottom line the reason for my call? Or, hey, this is a cold call. You mind if we roll the dice and see if this is a worthwhile conversation? However you want to do this. Oh, hey, this doesn't seem like my name's ringing a bell. Should I? Right, whatever it is, some type of a pattern interrupt. Now, the reason that we do that, though, is because we always get well, I'm going into a meeting, or I'm busy, or call me back, send me something in 6 months. So what we're looking to do is, from this pattern interrupt, to break that pattern. If I walk into a store and the person says, hey, may I help you? We're going to say, you say it, right? Hey, may I help you? As you walk in the door, you're likely going to say, nope, just looking. So that's the pattern interrupt that we want to do. And then we want to go into a curiosity statement. And this is where I'm going to really suggest that obviously awesome slide or book that I mentioned earlier. There's a couple of other ones out there, but it's this. It's really, let's poke the bear. There's a gentleman here, I can't remember in town his name, but he always talks about selling provocatively. And that's really what we want to do. We want to get them off a center, sell provocatively, so we're going to poke the bear to define the problem. Hey, listen, as business leaders, we're never satisfied with sales. We always want more, right? So that's our provocative statement. And then we want to make sure that we can go to a relate. How in the world to relate in their world? And we want to describe the problems that they're facing the way that they see it. And because the reason that people don't buy is because they don't believe that they can relate, or that we can relate to their business. So it's things like, hey, listen, I know that we're never satisfied with sales, and you know, people are always trying to pitch a silver bullet, you know, or buying CRMs, or hiring sales leaders, or spending money on, spending a fortune on marketing. But has anyone ever said, oh my gosh, I love my CRM? And, you know, sales leaders are notoriously hard to hire. And how in the world can we see if we're making a good ROI on marketing? I mean, who knows this stuff, right? So that's laying out the relative understanding of the world that they face. And then what we want to do is describe utopia, right? And let's face it, I mean, in a perfect world, wouldn't we want to have more control, visibility, and predictability with our revenue generation, rather than adding another band-aid by another headcount, or another tool, or some other crazy idea? I mean, that's really what we'd want, is how in the world do we fix this? And then you share your solution. You know, we believe that we discovered a simple to follow roadmap. It's not going to be easy, but it is simple to understand. And this 4-step process to fix the revenue generation problem. Then you ask a curiosity statement. Then you ask for interest. And not, hey, let's schedule some time. And, hey, would it be a terrible idea to maybe schedule a little bit of time to learn more about this simple roadmap? See if it would help solve your revenue generation problems, right? So it's a curiosity statement that we want to do. And then no matter what, the idea off of this, whether through outbound sales prospecting, or you can leverage the same approach in email, is simply to do this. I'm looking to have a conversation. And if I can have a conversation, I can show that I care by being empathetic and showing trust, because I'm listening deeply. And from that trust, we're on the same side of the table to solve the problem. And if I can't solve the problem, I'm going to go away. So before you kick me out and say, thank you for leaving, Bryan, I'm going to ask you to say this. how can you get after it, and what questions came up off of this conversation that we should discuss? So that's to you. Open up. Yep, go ahead, Wing.
Yes, thank you so much for the talk, Bryan. I have a question. So what's the difference between B2B sale versus B2C? And for, I guess for some of, especially software companies, say your users are not paying for the service, but at the end of the day, you're looking for the enterprise users who, for example, pay to deploy advertisements on your platform. So do you consider both sides as sales, or one is really user acquisition, and then for the enterprise, that's a customer acquisition? And how do you like come up with a strategy for both sides, or I guess definition of the sales here?
Yeah, no, that's an outstanding question. So let's go back to this. And the answer is not going to be quite as simple as we'd want. I can go back to a slide to hopefully help this. Okay, so if we go back to this slide, knowing how, and you can call it whatever you want, whether it's customer acquisition or user adoption or user acquisition, it's really the same. I view sales as a change in behavior. That change in behavior is that user now starts to use this platform. That change in behavior is that enterprise company starts to use my product. So there's both a change in behavior, but how we go at it is two different things. So we definitely want to do a B2C play from the user adoption. So that's going to be a different channel, a different medium, a different message to that person. And so we're going to have to identify for that product offering or that service offering, what's the ideal customer profile there? What are the personas there? So the beauty is here, Ying, it's still the same process, but the language, the labeling is going to be a little bit different. And it's going to be a much shorter sales cycle, likely e-commerce, likely a self-subscribe model, right? Because you have outbound demand generation, inbound lead conversion, self-service, aka e-commerce, even if I can put it onto a cart, that's how that would work. So principles are the same. The practical execution is different. Does that make some sense there? I don't know if I explained that well enough.
Yeah, that does make sense. So when we talk about sales, we're not talking about getting the customer paid for us. We're talking about change the status or change the behavior. For example, if you turn a free user to a premium user and starting to pay for the service, that's kind of sales as well. But for different type of users and customers, you may use a different strategy.
Yes. So on that particular one, what you talked about there, Ying, is whenever they go now, when they, let's say they're at a freemium model right here, they subscribe to a freemium. That would maybe move it to a bucket 5 where it's now strategic account management. So we're going to nurture them, drip on them to get them to a premium model. So that's how we would use it in that B2C user adoption. Whereas maybe we do a small pilot or a small portion of it at that enterprise space, and then they would be a customer, and then we land and expand, cross-sell, upsell. So again, same principles, but they're going to reveal themselves in a different approach or a different way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you're welcome. And I saw 2 other hands up.
We had a question, Bryan, over here.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Bryan. So we're in the poking phase, and we're doing a lot of discovery and introductory calls. They've been going really well. However, there are some potential clients who we feel like don't necessarily see the problem. They don't think it's a problem yet. Can you talk about your strategy when you encounter a client like that?
Yeah, so that's always the hardest. So that gets into the 30% that don't believe that they have a problem yet. So the question is, can we get to the point where we can identify what the observable characteristics are that others have had? So this is what I mean by observable characteristic. You know, oftentimes you're going to see financial planners, and they're really good at asking for referrals or introductions. And so they'll go, you know, Chelsea, I'm really looking for somebody that has $500 of investable capital. But who in the world is going to say that? That's not observable. But what is observable is I'm looking for somebody that just got a job, just got a promotion. Their kids just went to school. There is maybe a death in the family that they come into money. So what are those observable characteristics? So in your world, it might be trigger events that have just occurred. Somebody came to the company, left the company, shift in the market, or maybe there's something that everybody's frustrated with, but up until this point, they didn't realize there was a solution to it. So in that poking the bear, if you can relay that in a story that they go, yeah, you know what, that's me. That's the critical piece. So it's going to go into storytelling and really laying out the likelihood of what they're going through, those visible pains, frustrations, challenges, and laying that out in story form.
That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the other piece of that is lead with questions. Keep this in mind. It doesn't matter whatsoever you tell them. It's the question that you ask that makes them to go, that's a good question. So it's not what you tell them, it's what you ask them that gets them to self-realize. So your key here on this is storytelling led off by a question.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Good. And I saw one more hand, but I'm not sure if that covered it. All right. Well, my mission is to help help communities thrive through fantastic entrepreneurship. So if there's any way that I can serve you, help you, I have a podcast you can check out, or a number of different resources. More than happy to help out and serve. And I really wish you the best. And I can't thank you, everyone, for having me on here today. Any questions, you can, my email, well, I'll give you my actual email. It's my first name, Bryan. I'll go ahead and type this in here, Bryan at ebsgrowth.com. Just don't put it out there so I don't get a bunch of people hitting me. And then I'll also give you my cell phone if that would be helpful for you. If I can serve you in any way or help you out, let me know. I want all of you to do well, give back to communities so we have an awesome space for us.
Thank you, Bryan. And thanks everyone for coming.